Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're doing part 157 of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people are making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we've got quite an interesting assortment as per usual. So we have got here a couple of exhibit animals done by Scott. This is kind of that last kind of big group of them before we get into another pack that he's done that I'll spread over a couple episodes. We've also got extinct animals, a couple primates, and a couple rodents, which I'm quite excited to get stuck into. So we're going to be starting off now with the Togo Starburst Baboon tarantula. So a bit of a mouthful, but we're going to have a quick look at these guys. They're really, really beautiful animals. I can see why they get their name. They're actually beautiful. Really, really beautiful. Done by Scott. So this is the scientific name for the species is Heterus Scodara maculata. So these guys are a species of old world tarantula. So they are found in Togo and Ghana, typically. West African species, which is part of the old world. And these guys were first described in 1899 by Reginald in his Pocock. And this species does have a few common names, which includes the Togo Starburst and ornamental baboon tarantula, are most frequently encountered. So kind of a combination of those is Togo Starburst, baboon tarantula. So a bit of an assortment there, but a really, really cool animal. These tarantulas reach their full size at about 3 years of age, and when fully grown, they can reach leg spans of up to 13 centimeters, or about just over 5 inches. And the way they are characterized, you can see they've got these really, really beautiful patterns. They've got this chalky white coloration with mottled black and brown markings. And note they also have very thick rear legs, which lead many of them to believe that these are baboon spiders. However, they are not actually related to the true family of baboon spiders of Heracantinae. And these guys are an old world species, so they are from Asia and Europe, originating from Asia and Europe. They're old world species, or Asia and Europe and Africa. So since these guys are an African species, being an old world species, they do have a highly pointed venom, which means it's not recommended to handle them. So you've got to be very careful. And in terms of behavior, they are quite fast for tarantulas and defensive and possess medically significant venom. And as these are an old world species, they do not have the urcating hairs that you see at in New World tarantulas that they use to kind of flick at predators to scare them. They do not have that kind of adaptation. And this further encourages them to use bite as a defense. So instead of using the undulating hairs, to kind of irritate you and scare you off, these guys will just bite you. So that's another reason you've got to be a bit more careful with handling them. Which is cool. And they're also an arboreal species, so they're typically climbers. Though younger specimens have been noted to burrow during the first few months of their life, so typically they burrow for the first few months and then, head up to the trees. And females tend to reproduce readily, though sexual cannibalism, like other species of spider, does occur. And egg sacs have been recorded to contain between 75 to 130 little spiderlings, getting them ready for the world. But yeah, definitely a big fan of these guys. How can you not love them? Definitely a really, really cool animal. So yeah, that's, as we mentioned, that is the Togo Starburst Baboon Tarantula. Really pretty colours too. It's amazing how many beautiful colours you can get in tarantulas, and that I've mentioned throughout these episodes. Real, real beautiful. Anyway, we're going to carry on. So the next species, also done by Scott, we've got the Wallace's long-horned beetle. Oh, that's the Zoopedia. We don't want to have a look at that. That was an error on my part, so let's see if we can find one in nice... Ooh, you look quite nice there. I want one in a little better light. Let's see if we can spot one. Always like hanging out there, having a good time. Oh, you're perfect. Look at you. Look at this little cutie. So this is, as I mentioned, Wallace's longhorn beetle, or its scientific name, Batocera wallacei. Or they're a species of flat-faced long beetle in the family Laminidae of the family Cerebricidae. And the species name honors Alfred Russel Wallace, who discovered the species of beetle on the Aru Islands in Indonesia, and it was named by him by James Thomson in 1858. So quite a long history for this little guy, which is really cool and real beautiful patterns. So in terms of their description, they are quite a huge beetle. They reach about 80 to 85 millimeters, or 3.3 to 3.1 inches in length in males, though females tend to be a little bit smaller, so the bigger ones are males. The length of the antennae can reach between 215 to 230 millimeters, or about 8.5 to 9 inches in males. So that's where they get the name, the longhorn beetle, even though it's the antennae, it's like they've got big horns. So much longer than even their bodies themselves, which is wild. In the basic color, you can see is kind of a greenish brown or grey. There's a little bit of variation there, with these whitest dorsal patches on the elytra, or kind of the shield that covers their wings. And their larvae can be nearly 4 inches long, which is quite huge. I believe, 2.5 inches in a centimetre, that would be like 10 centimetres or so, I think. Maybe I'm not quite right there, but whatever. I'm not the best at that kind of stuff. But anyway, in terms of its habitat, these guys are quite common. They're found in Australia, Papua New Guinea, and the Moluccas, like the Aru Island and things like that. And there have been a few species described. I'm actually going to have a look at the Zoopedia for a bit more information, because I want to see what else we've got about them. See, you can see the 85 to 80 millimeters. So males are slightly bigger. So, as we mentioned that, the tribe level classification of Laraminidae is still yet to be completely resolved. They're split into 94 tribes. That's taxonomy stuff. No, nothing really about the species, more about the habitat. But yeah, really, really cool. Definitely a big fan. So, next up, I don't know what's going on there. Anyway, we'll sort that. Anyway, we'll have a look now. This is a really cool species. This is done by Leif and Nicholas Lionrider. The last two species were done by Scott. This is done by Leif and Nicholas Lionrider. We have got the California tapir. So Tapirus californicus. They're also known as the California tapir. These guys are an extinct species of tapir that lived in North America during the Pleistocene and went extinct about 13,000 years ago with a lot of the large megafauna. So, like other perissodactyls, tapir is actually originated in North America, even though today they're only found in South America and Asia. They lived in North America for most of the Cenozoic, and ancient tapirs can be dated back to the Eocene of about 50 million years ago on Ellesmere Island in Canada, back in the time it was a temperate climate. And by 13 million years ago, they were very much looking like the modern tapirs that you know and love today. But during the Pleistocene epoch, there were at least 4 species of tapir in the North American continent, but I'll get to there maybe an argument that it was just one. Along with this species, there was Tapirus merrimani from California and Arizona, Tapirus venerensis from Florida, Georgia, Kansas, Missouri, and Tennessee, and Tapirus copi, which is found in Pennsylvania and Florida. And by the end of the Pleistocene, all these species would have went extinct about 12,000 years ago, and has coincided with the extinction of many other groups of large megafauna. But as I mentioned in the taxonomy, there is multiple pieces of evidence that actually suggest that these 5 kind of species of Pleistocene tapir found in North America may have actually been the same species, and there's also been considered a subspecies of T. haysoni, which is T. copi, so another subspecies. But at the moment, they're kind of all kind of considered the same, as there's lots of overlaps in sizes and lots of overlap within these few species. So there is an argument that to be said that they're all just the California tapir, but at the moment, there's a little bit of debate there. But it makes sense because usually, they're big animals, not like there'd be lots of different habitats for them. Though you could argue, being America at the time, there was lots of different habitats they could exploit. There was 2 species of mastodons in America and 2 species of mammoths, so there could be easily 2 species of tapir. Anyway, Tapir californiensis, californicus, I believe you say that. Like most extant species of tapir, well, look at the other color. This is one of those really more funky variants, but looks quite nice. They were believed to be largely solitary and inhabited the coastal regions of Southern California, though there has been a specimen found in Oregon, so they likely lived on that kind of coast or around those areas, preferring forests and environments and potentially grasslands near rivers and lakes. It had a maximum weight of about 225 kilograms, or 496 pounds, and is estimated body length of 140 centimeters, or 4.6 feet. though no complete fossil skeleton has been collected. So in the same size as some of the larger tapirs, like the South American tapir, a little bit smaller than a Bard's tapir as well. So up there, kind of one of the bigger ones, or medium-sized ones, because you have the, Malayan and Bards are quite huge. They are very similar in terms of their skull to modern tapirs, so they did have that strong proboscis with all the strong nasal, ligament attachments and muscles and all the attachments to that, like all modern tapirs. So they pretty much didn't look too different. They didn't have they had the trunk very much just like a normal modern tapir. And they were herbivorous, and its diet was believed to have consisted of shrubs, leaves, aquatic plants, fruits, and seeds. And these guys would have been prey for animals such as direwolves, Smilodon fatalis, or the American saber-toothed cat, American lions, and even Paleo-Indians, or, the Clovis peoples, the first people to come to America, which is quite cool. And yeah, we do actually have a number of fossils that have been collected from the La Brea tar pits of this species. So they likely would have got trapped either swimming in there or foraging, very similar to a lot of many other species that would have been there during the Pleistocene, and in the La Brea tar pits. And these cluster tar pits have trapped and preserved many, many specimens of Ice Age fauna. So lots of, direwolves, short-faced bears, those kind of animals. But yeah, this was one of the animals living among them, and is definitely a cutie. And speaking of cuties, let's have a cute little baby. The little guy. How adorbs is this little man? Come on, you cannot tell me that's an adorable little guy. How can you not love the baby tapirs? I love their colours too. They're really, really cute. Anyway, we're going to carry on. So that was done by Leif and Nicholas Lionrider. Our next one is a mod that's modder that is kind of hasn't been around for ages, but has actually kind of come back now to make some mods. This is by Mega Kebab, so a really awesome modder has finally made it back on the scene, and we've got here the Pygmy Marmoset, or more specifically, this is the Western Pygmy Marmoset, or Cebuella pygmea. So there's two different species of Pygmy Marmoset. There's the Western Pygmy Marmoset, which is the species, and the Eastern Pygmy Marmoset, which has the scientific name of Cebuella nevatinensis. And the other one is Pygmea. This is the Western. So these guys are a small species of marmoset, a very small New World monkey from the northwest of the Amazon in Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. They were formerly regarded as the same species as the Western Pygmy Marmoset, with which has whitish underparts. And although Westerns occur further west than the Eastern Pygmy Marmosets, the primary separators of their range is the Amazon River and the Marion River, with the Western occurring in the north of them and Eastern on the south of them. So that's kind of the big divider. So if you're north of the Amazon, it's most likely this species, and the eastern ones are the south. So that's kind of the best way to tell them apart. So these guys claim to fame they are the world's smallest monkey. So Pygmy marmosets only do have a slight degree of sexual dimorphism. Within the wild, the males weighing on average 110 grams or 3.9 ounces, which is slightly smaller than the average female, which is 122 grams or about 4.3 ounces. So fully grown Western Pygmy marmosets have an average body length of about 13 centimeters or about 5.1 inches, with a tail marked with, you can see those black rings, and the average longer than their body at about 20 centimeters or 7.9 inches. You can see their fur is kind of like a fluffy brownish gold fur with black tinging on their shoulders, backs, and heads, with kind of ventral fur in the light yellow to white, so you can see that there. And there is very little physical differences between the two species of Western and Eastern Pygmy marmosets, and only really a slight difference in pelt colour. Similar to other New World monkeys, though, they have long claw-like nails on all their digits that they use mainly for climbing and foraging. And the skulls are similar to that of the Calyrex genus, potentially due to their tree-gouging behaviour, and their articular skeleton, or their back skeleton, has been shaped by long periods of climbing, clinging, and their underside down and underbranch locomotion. And while Pygmy marmosets leap the farthest relative to the length of their body, they are not very efficient with leaps, and thus actually rarely do so. It's just because they're so small, they take big leaps. In terms of their distribution, the western pygmy marmoset is native to South America, and their range, which intersects both Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, and they can be found in the upper Amazon basin, north of the Somales River, west of the Jabura River, and south of the Rio Cabello in Colombia. There is also a small subpopulation isolated to the west of Rio Hungula in North Peru, which is a concern of researchers because this is actually isolated by stresses like human stresses, like deforestation and pollution, things like that could be affecting this small population. They typically prefer a lowland habitat and like living within tropical forests that are flooded more than the 3 months of the year, and thus their habitat is in tropical climates within swamps or rainforests. So in terms of their diet, these guys are called an exdativore, kind of insectivore. So their diet mainly consists of the fluids or kind of exudates from trees. So they feed a lot on gum, resins, tree sap, and latex from liana and trees. And though evolving from feeding on gum to the sap of trees, they've also developed dental adaptation that their ancestors did not have. So they're specialist gum eaters. The specialized dental adaptations allow them to actually stimulate the fluids from the trees and gouge holes in the bark. It can also be found on occasion eating arthropods such as insects, particularly grasshoppers and spiders, small lizards, fruits, and flowers. So they are a gum eater / insect eater. So a little bit of variety there. Very interesting. Probably those similar adaptations do help with hunting both. So in terms of breeding, we'll have a look at the cute little babies. I hope that's a little baby there. So let's have a look. This is definitely a cute little baby. So this is the pygmy marmosets. They actually tend to frequently have fraternal twins. So when born, the infants are actually smaller than expected compared to their gestational length. And this is probably due to their quite slow growth in utero. So they are quite slow growing in their mother's womb. Studies looking at shown that the species are potentially able to prevent reproduction in a population through hormonal suppression. And if a single dominant female marmoset does not wish for her subordinate group members to reproduce, she can actually produce pheromonal signals which suppresses hormones that leads to ovulatory failure. However, this does not always work, and as a subordinate female group member succeeds in breeding, she might result to even killing the offspring. So that's kind of their social, how they work there, which is interesting. And also really cool is their vocalizations. So due to the being so dense, the habitats of the Amazon being so dense, the western pygmy marmoset relies a lot on vocal communication. So they use like trills when they're at a close distance, up to about 9 meters away or 30 feet, and they will use J calls when they're more than 20 meters or 66 feet away. So these kind of habitat acoustics have shaped the physical structure of these signals, used for both short and long-term communication. So long-term calls are the only ones that can be distinctively heard to the trills and J calls, as they are produced at a lower frequency at long distances. And they use these different calling methods to communicate distances to determine individual locations. So that's how they keep in touch with each other when they're foraging through the forest. They're interesting as well is the western pygmy marmoset have been observed to change the structure of their trill when in response to pairing with a new mate. So prior to mating, they would display unique trill vocalizations, but after 6 weeks, they actually become more homogeneous or more the same. So which is quite interesting. So they kind of take each other's, trill. The same studies also show that these vocal structures will remain stable 3 years after pairing. So basically, you get a new voice after meeting your partner, your life partner, which is quite cute. So that's a little cute fact about them. In terms of their conservation status, they are sadly considered vulnerable. Based on assessments, their population has declined more than 30% since 2009. And this is mainly attributed to anthropogenic factors or human factors such as deforestation, agriculture, mining, and settlements. With the distribution area of the species being physically large, their niche diet results in a significantly smaller suitable habitat within the areas they inhabit. And furthermore, they have been particularly impacted by the exotic pet trade, specifically in areas where their range will coincide with Ecuador and Peru. And hunting has also traditionally been a big stressor on their populations, with live capture a common practice of children and adults in many indigenous communities, and they can potentially be eaten and killed for target practice. And while they're only listed as the IUCN as vulnerable and not yet endangered, some scholars believe that more is needed to protect these animals. So some conservation methods include based on on didactic game, where the children learn about the ecology, behavior, and conservation of small primates, with the goal of increasing awareness. So that's kind of the thing. We're bringing awareness to these little primates and why we should conserve and things like that. And educating local communities does have a good long-term impact for conservation. So just letting them know about these animals and what they can do to better live with them. That's another big aspect of conservation that we don't often talk about. And they've also produced educational environmental education programs with the intention to provide children with the tools to reflect on how their actions affect on the environment. And they've also called these individuals called teaching teachers, where teachers are actually taught to create lessons about environment and also primate protection that has positive results among children. Though both authors, however, allude that the fact that empowering and educating local communities is simply just not enough to protect their populations. So potentially more protections on their natural habitat and things like that is going to be really helpful. But the education is also really, really good too. So people know about these marmosets and can love them and, better understand why we need to conserve them. So yeah, really, really cute little guy. Definitely love him. A real cutie. So that was done by Mega Kebab. Next up, we've got a mod done by Monsoon. How can you not love Monsoon? We have got here the Sulawesi. Is that the male? Yes, that's the male. So this is the Sulawesi crested macaque, or a Starburst crested macaque, also known as the black ape, even though they're not an ape. So these guys are an old wood monkey that lives in the Tangkoko Reserve in the northeastern tip of Indonesia and Sulawesi, as well as also on Starburst and other smaller islands. So locally they are known as the Yaki or Walau. They have its skin and hairless face is, with the exception with some white hairs, entirely jet black. So they do have a jet black body. Unusual for a primate as well, they do have striking reddish-brown eyes and have a long muzzle and high cheeks, with a long hair tuft or crest on their head, where they get the name Crested macaque. They have an ape-like appearance due to their small vestigial tail that has a stump of only about 2 centimeters, or 0.7 inches. And they typically have a total body length of about 44 to 60 centimeters, or about 17 to 24 inches, and a weight between 3.6 and 10 kilograms, or 8 to 23 pounds. They're actually one of these smaller macaque species, with a life expectancy expected to be about 15 to 20 years in the wild. So in terms of their ecology, we'll have a look at the females while we talk about them. So their ecology of these macaques, they are diurnal rainforest dwellers, and they're primarily terrestrial, so they spend 60% of their day on the ground foraging for food and socializing, while sleeping and searching for food in the trees. They're also mainly frugivores, so 70% of their diet consists of fruits, but they'll also consume leaves, buds, seeds, fungus, small birds and birds' eggs, insects like worms and caterpillars and beetles, snails, and even will consume small lizards or frogs. So they're pretty generous in that regard. In terms of their group behavior, they're typically found in groups of 5 to 25 animals, and occasionally groups of up to 75 animals. So smaller groups will typically have only a single adult male, while large groups have up to 4 adult males. However, the adult to female, male to female ratio is typically only 4 to 1, so 4 females for every male. The young adults are typically forced to leave their birth group upon maturity, and sometimes will form bachelor groups before seeking a connection with an existing adult mixed-sex group. And communications consist of various sounds and gestures, such as presenting their kind of large canine teeth, or smiling while grimacing, which is a threat display. Which is very interesting because, humans, when we show our teeth, we're smiling. It's a positive thing. For most apes and monkeys, it's a threatening thing. That's a little cool thing about them. So let's have a look at the cute little babies as we talk about their breeding style. Look at these little cuties, aren't they adorable? So the Starburst crested macaque is promiscuous, with both males and females mating multiple times with multiple partners. And the receptivity of the females is clearly indicated by the extreme tumescence, or the swelling of their buttocks. You see that, like the big red bits on the female, those will swell to tell that she is, ready to have babies. And the gestation time typically is 174 days, with the birth of usually single offspring having to the spring, where food is more plentiful. Young animals are typically nursed for approximately their first year of life and become fully mature about 3 to 4 years of age, with females typically maturing somewhat sooner than males. So that's another thing. Males got to get bigger and uglier, to defend themselves. Really interesting. They do have a lot of interesting human interactions. They are sadly considered critically endangered, as we'll get into. So because they devastate crops and fields, they are hunted as a pest and also are hunted to provide bushmeat. And clearing the rainforest further threatens their survival, and the situation on a small neighbouring island of Sulawesi, such as Bacan, is somewhat better since they have a low human population. The total population of macaques on Sulawesi is estimated between 4,000 to 6,000, while the booming population of up to 100,000 macaques found on Bacan. There was a series of surveys, actually, on trips of Sulawesi and the Mashinga Forest were made in 2004 to 2009, of which Vicky Minfer, who is the stud book holder for the European Endangered Species Program of these macaques, based on Paddington Zoo, and the Whiteley Wildlife Conservation Trust. So she's been monitoring the population density, which has declined from over 300 of individuals per square kilometre in 1980 to 20 to 60 today, with a conservation program being called the Salamakakan Yaki, or Save the Yaki, whether macaque is known as the local language, has been launched with local partners, other conservationists from Thailand, Germany, and the Wildlife Conservation Society, based in the US. Both Milwaukee and Paddington Zoo have also one of the number of mostly European zoos which hold ex situ or out of the habitat conservation breeding programs for these animals. And since 2006, they've been studying the biology and promoting the conservation. The Macara Nigra project has been promoting the conservation and studying the biology of these species. This project, in collaboration with the German Primate Center and the Borogo Agricultural Institute, is run by Angie Unhati and is located in the Tankoko Reserve, which is the home of the biggest crested macaque population remaining in the original distribution. Nonetheless, being critically endangered, they are still unprotected outside of the Tankoko Reserve, as they're readily hunted and slaughtered. They can easily be caught and killed and have no fear of humans, and they're actually considered a delicacy over by local residents. So it's really actually sad that they're not protected yet, but they should be protected, of course. In 2013, there was actually a cameraman, Colin Stanford Johnson, spent time in Sulawesi filming these monkeys for a BBC documentary called Meet the Monkeys. And if you remember back in 2014, believe it or not, that was 10 years ago, I remember this being a big meme as well. There was considerable discussion on copyright images that was generated by a selfie taken by a macaque, or in particularly this species, the Celebris crested macaque. And that was probably pretty good, because the discussion probably brought awareness to the situation of this critically endangered species. And, particularly in human world, copyright images and things like that. So, quite interesting. And it's a really cute photo. If you guys have ever get the chance to see it, it's probably on, if you look up the species, it's actually, on the Wikipedia, you can see the monkey selfie. And it's real cute, because they are quite cute. But yeah, really, really awesome. So this was a mod done by Monsoon. Monsoon, always knocking it out the park. Definitely can't argue that this is a great result. Monsoon, killing it as per usual. So, next up, we've got another one done by Leaf. So this is kind of a clone of one that we'll talk about soon, but this is the Norway rat, or the brown rat. So let's have a look at these guys. Or Rattus norwegus. So let's have a look at these guys. Really, really cute. That one's kind of got a bunk tail. Let's see if we can find one that looks good. There we are. So this is the brown rat, or Rattus norwegianus, also known as the common rat, street rat, sewer rat, wharf rat, Hanover rat, Norway rat, and Norwegian rat. These guys are a widespread species of common rat. And they're actually one of the largest moosoids, which is quite interesting as well, but we'll get into that. So we're gonna talk about that as well. So in terms of their mating, they were originally called the Hanover rat, with people wishing to link them to the 18th century England House of Hanover, but it's not known whether the brown Rattus norwegus came from, as it did not originate from Norway. However, there was the John Birkenholt, which authored the 1769 book Outlines of Natural History in Great Britain, gave it that kind of binomial name, believing it had migrated to England from Norwegian ships. So that's kind of where that name come from. In terms of their description, you can see they're a brown rat for a reason. Their fur is usually brown, and their underparts are lighter, grey or brown. They are rather large, moosoid, and they typically weigh twice as much as a black rat, and many times larger than a house mouse. So the head to body length ranges from 15 to 28 centimeters, or 5.9 to 11 inches, while the tail reaches between 10 to 24 centimeters, or 4.1 to 9.4 inches, therefore being shorter than the head and body. Adult weights can range between 140 to 500 grams, or between 4.9 to 17.6 ounces, with large individuals actually reaching 800 grams or 20 ounces, but is not expected outside of domestic specimens. And there has been talk about large rats as big as cats, but they've often been misidentified as muskrats or kopu, though it is common for breeding rats to weigh considerably less. It is common for them to weigh much less than 300 grams, and the heaviest living rat was actually recorded at 822 grams or 29 ounces and about 48.5 centimeters or 19 inches. What's really cool about them as well, they have acute hearing and are actually sensitive to ultrasound, and possess a very highly developed olfactory sense, so they're really good at smelling. Their average heart rate is about 300 to 400 beats per minute, with the respiratory rate about 100 per minute. The vision of pigmented rats are poor, about 20 to 600, with non-pigmented albinism with no melanin at his eyes, and both around 20 to 1200 vision, with terrible scattering of light within its vision. And both rats are dichromatic, so they perceive colors rather like humans with a red-green color blindness, and their color saturation is quite faint. They also have blue perceptors, however they also have UV receptors, so they can see ultraviolet light that humans and many other species actually cannot. So in terms of their reproductive rate, the brown rat, or kind of their body and biology, they are nocturnal and quite good swimmers, both on the surface and underwater, and have been observed swimming around metal poles several feet in order to reach garden bird feeders. Both rats dig well and often excavate extensive burrow systems, and they've actually been shown to possess metacognition, which is typically only found in humans and other primates, but further analysis suggests this may have been following simple operant conditioning principles. So in terms of communication, they are quite vocal, so they can produce ultrasonic sounds, and as pups they can range, young rats can use different types of calls to elicit and direct maternal search behaviours, as well as regulate their mother's movements in the nest. Although pups produce ultrasound, and any other rats at the age of 7 to 14 days will significantly reduce these ultrasound production as a defense around male rats as a defense response. And adult rats will also emit ultrasonic vocalizations to response to predators or perceived danger, with the frequency and duration of these cries depending on the sex and reproductive status of the rat. And the female rat will also emit ultrasonic vocalizations during mating. They'll also produce may emit short, high-frequency ultrasonic, socially indited vocalizations during rough and tumble play, but before receiving morphine or mating, or when tickled. So this vocalization or chirping has been actually compared to laughter and interpreted as expectation of something rewarding. So it's kind of like a little laughing thing. Like most rat vocalizations, the chirping is too high a pitch for humans to hear without special equipment, and back detectors have often been used by pet owners by this purpose to kind of hear what they're doing. In research studies, actually this little chirping that they do has been seen as associated with possible emotional feelings, and social bonding occurs with the tickler, resulting in the rats being conditioned to seek the tickling. However, as the rat ages, their tendency to chirp actually declines. One interesting thing as well is that both brown rats actually produce communicated noises capable of being heard by humans. The most common heard is kind of bruxing or teeth grinding, which usually is triggered by happiness, but also can be used as self-comforting in kind of stressful situations, such as like a visit to the vet. The noise is best described either as a quick clicking or a burring sound, varying from animal to animal. Vigorous bruxing can be accompanied by boggling, where they will rapidly bulge and retract their eyes, due to the movement of the lower jaw and below the eye socket. In addition, they commonly will squeak at a range of tones, so from high above to painful squeaks and soft persistent singing during confrontations. So in terms of their diet, they are true omnivores and will actually consume just about anything, but cereals are a substantial part of their diet. The most liked food for brown rats is scrambled eggs, raw carrots, and cooked corn kernels, and the least favourite foods were raw beets, peaches, and raw celery. But foraging behaviour is typically location or population specific, and varies by environment or food source. So brown rats living in a colony near West Virginia were caught fingerling fish, while other colonies would dive for mollusks in the Po River in Italy and show social learning. And rats even on the island of North Sea have been known to kill ducks and sparrows. So that's quite interesting. Although preyed upon by brown rats are chicks, mice, and small lizard, there's actually examples of a wild brown rat. Examination of wild brown rat stomachs in Germany revealed 4,000 view items. Most of them were plants, but also suggesting they will eat meat when given the option. In metropolitan areas, they typically will survive on discarded human food and almost anything else that can be eaten without negative consequences. So we're going to talk about the cute little babies. Cute little babies, where are they? Look at this little cutie right there. So this is a baby rat. The brown rat can breed throughout the year if conditions are suitable, and they can actually produce up to 5 litters per year. The gestation period is only 21 days, and a litter can number up to 14, although 7 is common. They reach sexual maturity about 5 weeks of age, and under ideal conditions, that means a population of females could increase by a factor of 3.5, or half a litter of 7, in 8 weeks. 5 weeks of sexual maturity and 3 weeks of gestation, which corresponds to a population growing by a factor of 10 in just 15 weeks. As a result, a population go from 2 to 15,000 in 1 year. The maximum lifespan for these guys is 3 years, although they mostly barely manage one, and the yearly mortality rate is estimated to be about 95%, with predators and interpacific conflict being major causes. Also, when lactating, females will display a 24-hour rhythm of maternal behaviour, where they usually spend more time attending to smaller litters than larger ones. And they also live in large hierarchical groups, either in burrows or subsurface places, such as sewers or cellars. And when food is in short supply, the rats lower on the social order are first to die. With a large fraction of a rat population exterminated, the remaining rats will increase their reproductive rate and quickly restore the old population level. The female is actually capable of becoming pregnant immediately after birth and can nurse one litter while being pregnant with another. She's able to produce and raise 2 healthy litters of normal size and weight without significantly changing her own food intake. However, when food is restricted, she can actually extend her pregnancy by over 2 weeks and give birth to litters of normal number of weight. So in terms of mating behaviours, males can ejaculate multiple times in a row, which increases the likelihood of pregnancy as well as increasing the number of stillborns. This also means they can mate with multiple females, and they can exhibit more ejaculatory series than the females, estrus females present. Males also copulate in shorter intervals than females, and in grouping, females will often switch partners. Dominant males typically have higher mating success and provide females with more ejaculate, and females are more likely to use sperm from dominant males for fertilization. And in mating, they've actually females have shown to have a clear mating preference for unknown males versus males they've already mated with, and often will resume copulatory behavior when introduced to the novel partner, which is interesting. And females also prefer to mate with males that have not expressed social stress during adolescence, and can determine which males were stressed even without observing differences in sexual preferences, which is quite cool. So a little bit interesting about them. In terms of their social behaviour too, another really cool aspect about them is they commonly groom each other and sleep together. And they often will have a dominance hierarchy, so one rat will be dominant over another. Groups of rats will tend to play fight, so it includes any combination of jumping, chasing, tumbling, and boxing. Play fighting involves rats going for each other's necks, while serious fighting they'll go for each other's backs. And if living space is limited, they may become aggressive, which may result in the death of some animals, reducing the burden on their living space. But rats, like most mammals, also form family groups of a mother and her young. And this applies to both groups of males and females. However, they are territorial and will act aggressively towards stranger rats. Rats will kind of fluff up their hair, hiss, squeal, and move their tails when defending their territory. And rats will chase each other, groom each other, sleep in group nests, wrestle with each other, have dominant squabbles, communicate and play in various other ways with each other. And huddling is another way that they kind of important part of rat socialization, which is an extreme form of herding, and like chattering or bruxing is often used to communicate when they're feeling threatened or being told not to come here. A common rat has been more successful in inhabiting and building communities on 6 continents than any other species, and has occupied more land than humans. And the only species that actually lived in more land than humans, which is quite interesting. During the wintry months, they will huddle in piles, usually cheek to cheek, to control humidity and keep the air warm as a heat conserving strategy. Just like elderly rats are commonly groomed and nursed by their companions, nestling rats are entirely dependent on heats from their mother, since they actually cannot regulate their own body temperature. Other forms of interactions can include crawling under, which is literally act of crawling under each other, walking over to find space next to their closest friend, also explained in the name, allo-grooming, which is grooming each other, and nosing, where they gently push their nuthers against the rat near the neck, which is quite cool. And what's interesting is that they're burrowers as well. So rats have been known to burrow extensively, both in captivity and in the wild. If given access to a suitable burrow, they generally begin to build a new burrow adjacent to the structure, as used to provide a sturdy roof for this section of the burrow. They also usually develop to eventually include multiple levels of this tunnel, including a secondary entrance. And older male rats will generally not burrow, while young males and females will burrow quite vigorously. Burrows also provide them with shelter and food storage, as well as safe thermoregulated nest sites. They will use these burrows to escape from threats in the surrounding environments, such as kind of loud noises. They'll retreat to their burrows if they're fleeing an intruder. They've also employed what's described as a pre-encounter defensive behavior, as opposed to a post-encounter defensive behavior, such as flight, fleeing, or avoiding the stimulus. So in terms of their distribution, they have quite a wide distribution. So possibly they originated from the plains of northern China and Mongolia. They've spread to other parts of the world during the Middle Ages. And the question of whether brown mates became commercial with humans remains unsettled, but as a species they have spread and established themselves along routes of human migration and pretty much live everywhere humans are. So the brown mate may have been present as early as 1553 in Europe, and a conclusion drawn by an illustration by Swiss naturalist Konrad Jesser in his book Historia Animalium, which was published in 1551 and between 1558, though it could also apply to a black rat. And as it spreads to Asia, it actually generally displaced the black rat in areas where it lived, as it is larger and more aggressive. They changed from wooden structures to thatched roofed into brick and tidal ones, favoured these burrowing rats as well across the arboreal black rats. In addition, brown rats eat a wider variety of foods and are more resilient to weather extremes. And in the absence of humans, they do prefer damp environments such as riverbanks. However, the majority of them now live in man-made environments like sewers. And they're often said there are many rats in cities as a people, but depending on areas, climates, living conditions, etc., brown rats in cities tend not to wander exclusively, often staying within 20 metres of their nest if they find a place that's quite suitable food. But they will range more widely when food availability is unavailable. It's difficult to determine their home ranges because they do not utilise the whole area, but use like regular runways to get across each other. And there's great debate over the size of actually the population of rats in New York City, which has been estimated to be almost 100 million, to as few as 250,000. And the actually city appointed Catherine Corradi is Rat Cesar, which is vision to address the rat problem in New York. And this problem focuses on making, policies such as garbage regulation and more rat trapping to help control the population. There's also evidence that these guys have been rising, with estimated about 81 million rats in the UK. With this figure, that means there's 1.3 rats per person, so 3 rats per person. And the high rat populations have been attributed to the low climate, and with an increase in global temperature, it's likely this will increase as well. In tropical and desert areas, they tend to be limited to human-modified habitats. In contiguous areas of rat-free areas include the continents of Antarctica, the Arctic, some isolated islands, Alberta, which is a Canadian province, and certain areas of New Zealand where they've never been introduced to or been eradicated from. though most of Australia, apart from the eastern and southern coastal areas, do not have significant populations. With Antarctica being inhabitable by rats and the Arctic extremely cold when they cannot survive outdoors and the human population is very low, so there's not really areas where they can live. But these guys are kind of the poster child for endangered species. Many of them have went to many areas around the world and have threatened local fauna, as spreading with humans. The Faroe Islands, they've been a big issue. Alaska, Alberta as well, they've managed to keep them out of there. And New Zealand is another place. So they these kind of areas, they try to keep them out of New Zealand because of using fences, things like that, to keep them out of the way, from native animals where they're not adapted to deal with mice. Alberta is actually the largest rat feed populated area in the world. So the only rat species able surviving in Alberta is the brown rat. So they use a lot of programs. They pretty much just prevented them. Oh, that was the cat. Spooked me. Pretty much prevented them from spreading into the in the first place. Into there. But only zoos, universities, and research institutes can actually keep the rats in Alberta. And actually having fancy rats without a permit can actually get you fined. It's quite interesting. Also, Alaska. There's the Halifax Island where they invaded and pretty much destroyed all the bird life, but they removed them in 2007. There's other areas that have been removed from rats as well. And the Faroe Islands, they were introduced, and today they can be only found on 7 of the 18 Faroe Islands. And now they're trying to get rid of them and try and get rid of them. What's really cool as well, they do carry, as rodents, they have a lot of diseases. Well, it's not cool, but it's very interesting. They have rat bite fever, Wells disease, viral hemorrhagic fever, Q fever, cryptosporidiosis, and Hepatitis syndrome. And they're an important reservoir for Clostridium brutalli, which is a bacterium that causes Q fever, and superpellets of the bacteria can be found as high as 53% of wild populations of rats. They're also seen as a reservoir for toxoplasmosis, where it usually spreads from rats to humans, but when domestic cats feed on these rats. So the parasite has a long history, so often will cause them to find cats to be eaten by, so it can breed in the cat's digestive system and, kind of thing as well. There's also, they can be responsible for treating other disease, and they've often sometimes actually mistaken for being the major reservoir for the bubonic plague or the Black Death. However, the bacteria responsible is usually transmitted by rat fleas, which is often a common carrier of ground squirrels and wood rats. However, they may suffer from the plague as well, so even though they're blamed for it, they're not often the cause. It can be other animals such as wood rats and squirrels. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, it actually suggests that 17% of the city, in New York City, 17% of the brown rat population was actually infected with SARS, which is interesting, or COVID. And in terms of people using them, they are quite common in laboratory rats, so people will often breed them for white-marked rats to be killed for rat baiting, but also used for laboratories. So there's considered a model organism, which we use to, study how our bodies work and many other types of experiments. Because they grow quickly and are easy to keep, they're great for that. They're also kept as pets, so a lot of places around the world, they have fancy rats, which have been bred for the last couple hundred years to have many different patterns and styles. And they've even been used as working animals. So they have used working rats. However, there are some species like the Gambian pouch rat that's actually used to detect bombs. So there is the term working rat, so they're considered a working animal sometimes. But yeah, quite cool. Definitely a little cutie. So that's a brown rat, or Norway rat, done by Leaf. And the next one is the relative that we've just been talking about. We've got the black rat, done by Leaf and Nicholas Lyon Ryder. So this is the black rat. So this is Rattus rattus, where the other one was Rattus norwegus. Also known as the roof rat, ship rat, or house rat. These were a common long-tailed rodent and the stereotypical rat genus of the genus Rattus, and likely would have originated in India, but is now found worldwide. So in terms of their taxonomy, they were first described by Carl Linnaeus in 1758 as the black rat, and there was thought to be 3 different subspecies, but now they're all kind of considered just colourmorphs. In terms of their characteristics, a typical black rat is between 12.75 to 18.5 centimeters, or about 5 to 7 inches. not including the 15 to 20 centimeters or 5 to 8 inch tail, and they typically weigh between 75 and 230 grams or 2.6 to 8.1 ounces depending on population. And despite their name, they do have different color forms. They can be usually black to light brown in color with a lighter undersides. And in England during the 1920s, they were bred and shown alongside domesticated brown rats, and have also include a usually green tinted variety, which is quite interesting. So in terms of the origin, black rat bones remain dating to the Norman period were discovered in Great Britain, and they were thought to occur in prehistoric Europe and in the Levant region during post-glacial periods. The black rat in the Mediterranean region actually differs quite greatly from its South Asian ancestor, having 38 instead of 42 chromosomes. And the closest relative is supposed to be the Asian house rat from Southeast Asia. These two seem to have diverged about 120,000 years ago in southwestern Asia, and it's unclear how this rat managed to make it to Europe due to insufficient data, although they may have used a land route, and they actually spread through Europe through the Roman conquest as well. They're also a resilient vector for many diseases, and they're able to hold so many infected diseases in their blood. They were thought to have been spreading bacteria contaminated fleas on their body, which is thought to have been the reason for the Black Death or the plagues, very similar to, the brown rat. However, recent studies have actually brought the theory into question, and it throws human themselves as a vector, and the models of epidemics actually of the black rat population does not show the correlation. And it also studies show that other Asiatic rats do have these plague reservoirs which spread far to Europe, so there may have been more humans and not less rats, so they may have been unjustly demonized. In terms of their distribution, the black rat originated in India and Southeast Asia and spread to near Europe and Egypt through the Roman Empire and reached Great Britain as early as the 1st century, and then subsequently it was spread throughout the world by Europeans. And they're largely confined to water regions and have warmer regions, and have been supplanted by brown rats in cooler regions and urban areas. In addition to that, the brown rat is far larger and aggressive than this species, and the change from wooden structures and thatched roofed and to brick and tile boobies favoured the burrowing brown rats over the arboreal black rats. And however, in addition, brown rats eat much more generalist and more resilient to weather extremes. So these guys were kind of just outcompeted. But they can actually increase exponentially under certain conditions, such as the fruiting of bamboo plants, which can be devastating to some farmers. And they actually were thought to arrive to Australia with the first fleet as well. But they are quite adaptable and live in a variety of different habitats. In urban areas, they are found around warehouses, residential buildings, and other human settlements. They can also be found in agriculture areas such as barns and cornfields. And in urban areas, they tend to live in dry upper levels of buildings and are commonly found in wall cavities and false ceilings. And in the wild, they'll live in cliffs and rocks in the grounds and trees. They're great climbers and like to live in palm trees, such as pine trees. And their nests are usually spherical and made of shredded materials such as sticks, leaves, and other vegetation and cloth. In the absence of palms and trees, they can burrow into the ground, but they also be found along fences, ponds, rivers, and streams and reservoirs. So it's thought that male and female black rats typically have a similar sized home range during the winter, but male rats actually increase the size of their home range during the breeding season. And although, along with differing between black rats of different sexes, home ranges also differs depending on the type of forest in which they inhabit. So, for example, the southern beech forests of South Island, New Zealand appear to be much larger than those of the non-beech forests of North Island. So different, habitats in New Zealand, and that can be arranged throughout the world. Due to the limited number of rats that have studied in home range studies, estimated maybe just depend on geography and what food availability is there. In terms of their diet, these guys are considered omnivores, eat a wide variety of foods that includes seeds, fruits, stems, leaves, fungi, and a variety of small invertebrates and vertebrates. They're generalists, so they typically don't have any tendencies, very similar with their food tendencies, and they and which incline to a tendency to feed on any meat provided from cows, swine, chickens, cats, and dogs. They're also similar to T-squirrels, as they prefer fruits and nuts, and they will eat about 15 grams or about 0.5 ounces per day and drink about 15 milliliters of water per day. Their diet is high in water content, and they are a threat to many habitats because they feed on birds and insects in places like New Zealand and other islands. They're also a threat to many farmers because they eat a lot of cereals, sugar grains, coconuts, oranges, and coffee beans. So they're quite a powerful, agricultural pest. The black rat displays flexibility with its foraging behavior, so it's a predatory species that is adapted to many different microhabitats. They often meet and forage together in close proximity within and between sexes. They tend to forage after sunset, where their food cannot be eaten quickly, and it searches for a place to carry and hoard its food for a later time. And although it eats a broad range of foods, they are highly selective feeders and only restricted selection of food when dominating. And when offered with a wide variety of food, they eat a small sample of each, and this allows it to monitor the quality of food it's present year-round, such as leaves, as well as seasonal fruits such as insects and herbs. This method of operating is a set of foraging standards, usually determines the final composition of its meals, so they typically pretty much do what they can around that stuff. In terms of nesting behavior, they've actually used a lot of tracking devices such as radio transmission emitters, to find occurred dens located in trees as well as on the ground. And this was another study done in New Zealand in the northern region. Rats have been found denning together. They also appear to den and forage in separate areas of their home range depending on the availability of food resources. Also, research shows that in New South Wales, the black rat prefers to inhabit lower leaf litter in forest habitats. And there actually is a correlation between the canopy height and logs and the presence of black rats. This correlation may result in distribution of the abundance of prey and the available refuges for rats to avoid predators. As found in North Head in New South Wales, there's a positive correlation between rat abundance, leaf litter cover, canopy height, and litter depth. And all other habitat variables show little to no correlation. And with the species relative, the black or Norway rat prefers to nest near the ground. These guys of a building there will prefer the upper floors and roofs, and where they got their common name, the roof rat. In terms of diseases, though, they do carry a lot of pathogens like the bubonic plague, typhus, toxoplasmosis, as well as the black rat. And it's also been hypothesized that the displacement of the black rats by brown rats may have actually led to the decline of the Black Death, which is interesting as well. And they do often carry a number of bacterial infections that can affect humans. And in terms of predators, they typically are preyed by cats and owls in domestic settings, though in less urban settings they can be preyed by weasels, foxes, and coyotes. That's part of the reason why weasels were introduced to New Zealand to hunt rats. And these predators do have little effect to control the black rat population because they are quite fast climbers. In addition, though, they also have a keen sense of hearing and are quickly able to hide away from, avian predators. So, in terms of invasive species, like brown rats, they're both introduced into New Zealand, and they have been quite invasive species. And any areas, because they are non-native, they are fast breeding, they often will consume seabirds and seabird eggs and actually reduce the pH in the soil because all those birds, try to bring nutrients from the ocean to the land, and since they're eating a lot of the babies, that nutrients isn't returned, which is a big issue, and that can cause declines in many different species of island endemics. So that's a big thing across the world. Hawaii, New Zealand, places in Australia, and also the Caribbean. A lot of islands suffer from species like rats and mice and things. So they are a complex pest because they influence both environments in both harmful and beneficial ways. So the population sizes often, when they're introduced in new areas of native species, will decline or go extinct because they're quite generalists. They actually have been known to displace many native species of rats in like Madagascar, the Galapagos, and the Florida Keys, as species such as the native bush rat has often been invaded in Australia, have been invaded by the black rat, and they take over their habitats. So they can outcompete native species of rats to Australia and other places, so that's a big issue for them. And despite these guys' tendency to displace native species, they actually seem to aid sometimes in increasing species population numbers and maintaining species diversity. So the bush rat, which is actually a common vector from spore dispersal and trifles, has been extirpated from many habitats in Australia, and in the absence of this vector, the black rat has kind of taken that role and eats the fungi and disperses it. So with the absence of those rats, it's actually, these guys are stepping up and helping this endangered species. So since the black rat now occupies many of these habitats, they play that important role. So by eradicating the black rat populations in Australia, the diversity of fungi would decline, which potentially do more harm than good. would. But the real solution would be just help the bush rats, eradicate them, and just the bush rats will come back and, help. So if we help the bush rats after that, and that's probably the best thing because, we don't want declining species. So, yeah, that's probably the best way to do it. But luckily for both black and brown rats, there are some ways to help control their populations to help native species. So there's large-scale rat control that's been taking place in New Zealand and other places. The main place is kind of New Zealand has pioneered this to help species such as Macaque and yellowheads or mahuna. These pesticides such as 1080 or sodium fluoroacetate and pindile that has been kind of spread through aerial spray by helicopters to control populations of rats over large areas like national parks and things like that, over like hundreds of thousands of hectares. Baits such as border kafuma as well can be used as well, and that could actually be dyed to deter birds from eating it. They kill and identify rats. They also use traps, used things like peanut butter to track them as well. Tracking tunnels also used to monitor them. Rat poison control seems to be effective at reducing rat populations in non-threatening sizes, but they always will rebound. But besides their highly adaptable food behavior and fast reproduction, typically you've got to eradicate them fast and quick because they can rebound quite fast. And luckily there are a few islands around the world, such as Puerto Rico, that are campaigning to get rid of the black rat. There are places such as Campbell Island, which actually, back to the brown rat, actually believed to have the highest density of brown rats in the world. In 2000 and I think it was 2004, Campbell Island was eradicated, all the brown rats from the island, and now the Campbell Island teal and a lot of other native bird species are doing really well. So it's a great example of conservation. Sometimes you have to kill for conservation. In New Zealand, it's kind of a thing as well because it's cultural. We know that we got to get rid of these introduced mammals to help our native animals, but other countries looking at us think it's weird. But hopefully these sort of techniques can apply to other species and help deal with invasive species across the world. But there are some declines in populations, such as eradication projects have managed to get rid of black rats from the British Bristol Channel and the Shant Islands in the Hebrides, and there have been some areas where they've been declining in other places as well. And hopefully, we have more and more declining in other places around the world. So as we know, as we all love animals, these introduced species do hurt species in New Zealand and places like in the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, seabirds all across the world, those species that are not well adapted to deal with these mammals. But with these eradication programs, as long as they're done humanely, they can be really, really good for helping populations. But yeah, I could actually, there's not really many videos on YouTube. I try to talk about that stuff because it's obviously something I work in because I am a New Zealander. I work in conservation. So it's something I talk about a lot. It'd be really cool to have a video or something like that, or maybe a game that I can use to talk about that. And that's what a great example is, using the conservation stories of black rats and brown rats while I talk about these animals to talk about that wonderful work going on. But yeah, this is a little bit of a ramble, but I think this is a great place to end the video. So yeah, thank you Leaf, thank you Scott, thank you Nicholas Line Rider, Mega Kebab and Monsoon. You've all done really wonderful jobs with these mods. So yeah, I really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified of anything. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye bye.